Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As of right now, I'm on my own, and there is no Felipe in the vicinity, which is quite disconcerting. Makes me a little bit uncomfortable with him being my co-host and everything. But don't worry, it won't be that way for long. I'm simply addressing you this way to let you know that the episode you're about to hear is going to be the first part of a two-part discussion we had with our guest and good friend, the Jack J. Hutchinson Band roadie, Mr. Johnny Della, who joined us for this episode to discuss classic rock. Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. To my left is Mr. Felipe Amarin. How you doing, man?
Yeah, we're good, man.
Good. And to our right, we have one of our first guests, Mr. Johnny Della, who happens to be the, what do we call him? The roadie of the Jack J. Hutchinson Band. Yesterday, he didn't think he did enough to be a roadie. But he was like, hold on, Johnny, you realise you do more than all of the band combined.
we never discussed the official title for his role in the band. But he's a roadie. He drives the car, sells the merch, helps to set up the stage. Oh, it's a long list of tasks for Mr. Johnny.
I want to call it roadie / merchman / therapist / he does everything.
I'll take that.
But anyway, welcome Johnny Della. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. Oh, right. So I'm Johnny Della. The roadie for the band. I'm like, my day job is a service engineer, but my passion is just to be on the road with these guys, and I work with Planet Rock as well, doing all the merch for them. My first gig that I went to was right back in 1976. That was the Who at the Valley, wow. And actually that is the moment really that changed my life in how I regarded music. And it was a band called the Sensational Alex Harvey Band. Wow. They came on. It was my big sister Sally. She took me along with her boyfriend. They said, "Would Johnny want to come, to see it?" And I said, "Yeah, would I?" So that was my first gig at the Valley, and then Sensational Alex Harvey Band was playing. Now there's supposed to be 60,000 at that venue, but in those days there wasn't much regulation on the tickets, and there was a lot of
health and safety wasn't a thing by then at all.
No, it wasn't, and there was a lot of counterfeit tickets going around. And honestly, there must have been at least 100,000 people in, and it was in the days when it was a proper football stadium with terracing. So we all sat on the terracing. I remember just sitting in the blazing sunshine before the rain came and the Who came on, and it absolutely bucketed down. But I'd never seen a light show like it in my life. But the moment that actually changed my world with music was when Alex Harvey was on, and he started singing their cover of My Delilah, the Tom Jones song.
Yes.
Honestly, and when you see like 100,000 people just singing that back, it's like, oh, this is what I want to do all the time.
Yeah.
And I've been a gig goer like forever since those days.
Since the 70s.
That's when we met Johnny. Johnny was at one of our gigs. You're a fan of Jack's, and since then it just kind of went off, and Johnny's just asked to help out, and then we ended up needing Johnny more than than we thought we did.
Well, yeah, I think I met Johnny at the Rambling Man Festival. We were playing there. I was coming from a gig somewhere. I don't remember where it was coming from, but we had a really early slot at midday, and you helped us out and whatever. But I remember talking to you after the set, and I was completely smashed by them, so tired and slightly drunk.
We swapped clothes.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah, hats and
jackets and stuff. Yeah, I remember that.
How did it fit?
I don't actually. Oh, it didn't. That's
fit.
The thing.
Nothing fitted. That's what makes it so good.
I don't even remember. I just know because we took pictures.
Yeah.
But one question for you, Johnny. So since when you actually got involved with, the practical side of the rock and roll industry, not only going to gigs, what was the first thing you did as a job for the rock and roll industry? Like, was it Planet Rock?
Well, it was Planet Rock, and I was so fortunate. It was just pure luck. I mean, I've always listened to Planet Rock since they launched, because I thought this is, right up my street. This is exactly the kind of music that I love to listen to. And now I've got my own radio station that I can just tune into whenever I want to. And as soon as I put it on, there's always something on that I like. So I thought, this is great. And this is going back years and years. So right from when Nicky Horn was like the DJ on it, it's I was always like emailing and just being involved with the station. And then they asked for people to listeners to come in and help choose the records that were on the list. What we thought was a good one that they should be playing. And there was 2 of us got invited in, and it was John Norman emailed me and said, could you come in on I think it was a Thursday at lunchtime, and we'd have the meeting, and there'd be like everybody, all the DJs, everyone round the table, and we want you to chip in with what you think, because we want to hear what the listeners think. So I did that. It was so exciting. I got a little tour of the radio station, and whatever I said or did, I must have made a good impression on them, because they asked me to help out. I'm not sure what I said or did, but that same day, like John said, look, we're short of a man for the merch desk at Rockstock, our first Rockstock that's coming up. Like, would you consider like working with us? And that was another moment of, would I? Yeah. It was like, I didn't even have to think about it. And it was like, and since then, that all went well, the first one. And as the years have gone by, I've just sort of, I almost feel like I'm part of the furniture, like when we do the festivals and that, because everybody seems to know me. And I just, as usual, just do a little bit of everything leading up to when the event starts. And then I'm on the merch desk. But in between all that, I do all sorts of other things to help out as and when I can.
See, we're meant to be the rock stars, but when you're at a gig, it's this guy that everyone knows. Everyone knows Johnny. I'm the one holding the doors open for people, which is fine. I'm a bass player.
No one knows what the bass player is.
Out of the whole band, I'm the one who I don't expect anyone to know, and I'm fine with that. But everyone knows this guy. So yeah, we thought, as a good friend of ours and as a guy who is in the industry and the circuit that we are currently operating on, we thought it'd be great to get you on. So welcome to the show, Johnny.
Let's get the show officially started.
We are. Do it.
Okay, here we go. Fucking hell. What's going on with this today? Okay.
You need more practice at that.
I don't think he does, Johnny.
It's too early.
I don't think he does need more practice.
It's too early.
Don't tell people it's 10:30 in the morning.
Well, it is 10:30. No, I'm telling people it's 10:30 in the morning, and I said to the guys, it's too early for any rock and roll related stuff. The only way to make this right is if at least one of us is drinking a beer.
And I said that's fine.
Yeah.
And Johnny said I'll have a coffee.
Well, I would join you in a beer, but someone's got to do the driving.
So anyway, let's get. We've got the episode officially started. The topic and sort of content of discussion for this episode is a content that has been quite hot in the last few months in the kind of British rock industry, if you like, and that is the discussion about the new wave of classic rock. Because an album came out, it was a compilation album released called The New Wave of Classic Rock Volume 1. And what this had was 42 different bands on it who these people, and when I say these people, this is a community, a group on Facebook who have come together. Johnny, would you like to explain it? Because I feel you know them a bit better. Well, how did the New Wave of Classic Rock community begin? It was,
as you say, it was just a group of people, fans, that, to a certain extent, I'm sort of in that group as well, that I don't actively do that much for the movement, apart from I just go to the gigs and buy the CDs.
Yeah.
But there's a number of people that decided to take it to a different level. It wasn't just a thing of going to the gigs and supporting the bands through that and through buying their merch, and obviously the CDs. They wanted to take it on to a new level and promote it a little bit more, because we all realise there's some really good bands coming through, some strong bands like yourselves, like you're part of that new genre of just new bands coming on, but flying the flag for traditional rock and roll.
Yeah.
And
May I say something about that? That's an interesting thing about how important the fans are for the rock industry, in the sense that obviously the fan is the customer or the consumer in the end. We need them to exist in order to make the industry survive financially. But it's not only that. If you think about pop music, sometimes you generate the content and you just push it to the people, and then you get people to listen to it. Whilst with rock and roll, sometimes the media is not, in favor of what rock and roll represents. And rock and roll is never really like a fashion, and it's not like that trendy. And it comes from the audience, the need for new bands and stuff. They're like, do you know what? We want more rock and roll. We want new bands. We want to promote them. So before anyone in the industry says, oh, we need to do a gig, whatever, people will come and say, we want more rock gigs. And if no one does that, we're going to organize ourselves, which is pretty much what those people do. They spread the word. They do the publicity, for the bands. They put the gigs together sometimes, and they put an album together. Yeah. That's insane. I mean, it's amazing how that's what I think it's beautiful about the rock industry in comparison to any other musical style. It's like, because the fans, they like it so much, they're willing to go the extra mile to help the bands to exist and make the scene survive, regardless of how trendy it is at the moment. It's really cool.
Well, yeah, we see it as a way of life. That it is. We've all come to. I mean, we all consider when we're at gigs that we're with family, and some shows more than others, that it will be a night in London, and literally everybody in the venue will know each other, and it would just be it will be community, like it is definitely a sense of community, and it's even more than that. I mean, it really feels like a family, that that you're going to be there, and you're going to be with people that love what is going on, and it extends to the bands on stage as well, because we all that is what is so wonderful about this movement, that the bands are part of the whole thing, that everybody mixes, everybody, like you're up on that stage, but as soon as that gig's ended, everybody's back talking, chatting, and we're all friends, and it is really it's something special that has happened to the rock industry. Now, when I used to go back in the 70s and the 80s, and to a certain extent the 90s, the people on the stage were distant from you. There was the divide. Yeah, I did like back in the 70s, that there was this mystical, like I used to go and watch Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel all the time. I still do. They're still touring, and to me they're classic rock, but they don't get on Planet Rock, apart from Joe Elliott plays them, and no one really talks about them. And it's like, well, when I grew up, because he's a South London Cockney Rebel, Steve Harley, Cockney Rebel. He's from South London, just down the road from me. But when I grew up, it was always either Bowie or Bolan. They were the two. But of course, I went for like more the underdog, and it was like, yeah, that's my band. But when I used to go and see these bands, it was like something like, wow. It was something mystical, like that you just thought, oh, I could never meet these people. Like there's something different, and we didn't have all the social media in those days.
I was just going to say that has to be a big factor. Yeah, you can just message any band member nowadays, and the chances of them seeing it can be there.
And so, sorry, what I'm sort of trying to say is that was great in those days, because when I was growing up, I wanted my rock stars to be different. I didn't want them just to be like me.
Yeah,
but now that time has gone on and things have evolved, and it's like the music is still the same, that it's still really good music. That these new bands like yourselves, you're creating music that would fit in those eras. Like you could have recorded some of your stuff like back in the 70s and it would fit in there. But now it just seems that where it was all distant before with the big bands, now it has become a community. And both eras for me are great. And but I'm loving this era.
I think it would be nowadays with the whole technology and the access to communication and everything we have, it would be a bit fake to be distant, to have that gap between an artist and the audience. I think some of those guys were their attitude was completely honest about it. It's like there was a real distance between the artist and the audience because the communication was different. There's no social media.
Exactly. And I think the artist needed that as well. The artist needed to create a persona, a character, and just not be a normal person, like Johnny said.
Exactly. Now people expect, like, if you think about Dave Grohl and is so so good at communication, and it seems to be really friendly with everyone. I know people who got the chance to meet him. He was like really nice guy. He would chat to everyone. It's like not like, oh, I do something different, I'm a rock star. Most of those guys nowadays, they don't have that kind of attitude, which is good, which wouldn't belong to the world we have now, as I said. So it makes sense. But also it changes the whole dynamics of the scene, and it's fun that everything we've been saying about community, the sense of community, is what kept that particular kind of music alive. People want more of it. And obviously, some of those bands that we consider classic, that's one point I think we should talk about, is like, what is classic rock? Some of the bands we consider classic rock are still playing, right? Still active, because rock and roll is a really fairly new music genre, isn't it? It started in the 50s. You think about it, you've compared to classical music, you compare to other music, folk music, whatever. Rock and roll hasn't been around for that long. Some people who saw the rise of rock and roll still alive, still like my mum, she could listen to the Beatles when she was around 8-9 years old. She was listening to the Beatles when they first started. And Paul McCartney is still gigging, so it's very recent to think about it. So it's really hard for me to kind of draw the line. What is classic rock? Does it refer to a time back in the day and to some of those bands who became iconic, or is a music genre in itself? What is classic rock? Because it kind of blends into what we have nowadays. You start from, the classic rock bands who are still performing, and you have, modern bands, young boys and girls playing rock and roll that sounds like the 70s and the 60s or 80s. But, it's the same style. This is the same kind of music. Can we call a young band or young musician, can we call them classic? It's interesting.
Because classic means historical, in the past.
Yeah.
The days gone by.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm saying. This is the interesting thing about this new wave thing, and so what we alluded to at the start of the episode was the fact that this community have started, they've become a community. These people started this community that's now, it's well in excess of about 20,000 members, isn't it? I think on their Facebook group. And what they're saying is that the bands they're promoting and the bands they're putting on this album are encapsulating the feeling, the vibe, the energy, and the rock and rollness from those classic rock bands from days gone by. Yeah. And I think that's what they're trying to label these new bands with, because I agree with you. I don't think you can call something... You can't call something modern classic, because that is like an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. But
I think it's interesting what you said about the bands and the different generations, because listeners at home, you've got to remember... Johnny, are we right to tell your age?
Yeah.
How old are you?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm a week away from being 60.
So Johnny is almost 60.
So,
Felipe is 37. 37.
Yeah.
And I'm 26. So essentially, you've got 3 different generations here. I mean, I suppose there's like a 48-year-old missing, got 26, 37, one missing, then Johnny's generation. But this is fantastic because we don't usually get this opportunity to discuss. What I'm going to do now is I just want to ask all of us who or what we consider a classic rock band. So no explanation. Johnny, just list off, when you hear the term classic rock, what are the first 5 bands that come to your mind?
Well,
not your favourites, but the first 5 when you hear the term classic rock.
Classic rock, right. Well, it's got to be Thin Lizzy, Iron Maiden, Pink Floyd, Yes, Rush. Actually, I think that's 5.
That's really interesting. Should we discuss that and then we'll do ours? Because I want to touch on about that is that for me, Johnny has just said Pink Floyd, Yes, and Rush. In my opinion, those are 3 progressive rock bands, and I wouldn't put those 3 bands near classic rock, the term. But Johnny, they're one of the first 3 bands when he hears it.
Well, yeah, but then you think about it, progressive rock, for me, is classic rock. Because then maybe it goes back to the time those guys started. They were all like kind of existing at the same time.
Yeah.
You had Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple and Pink Floyd. For me, they're all classic rock bands because they were creating rock and pushing the boundaries of what rock and roll is about
in its heyday in the mid-70s. Yeah.
And when rock and roll was big. That they would sell millions of albums and stuff like that. So those guys, classic rock for me. But it's funny though, because the first gig I ever been to was Deep Purple in 1999 in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So that is like, well, they were classic. But for me, how funny is that? I had the Made in Japan CD. Right, it was the first rock CD I ever bought. And it was so iconic for me to see John Lord with his keyboard, things like, wow, it's rock and roll, that long hair thing. And when I saw him on stage, I said, wow, that CD, which was obviously an LP at the time, from the 70s, and now it's 1999, and I'm here, and that guy's in front of me.
Yeah.
So he still exists.
Yeah.
I was really amazed by the fact that those guys were still around, still doing it. So what is classic in that sense? It's like something that, is it a period in time? Or is it a style? Why don't you consider Pink Floyd or any progressive rock band as a
classic rock?
Classic rock. Well,
for me, so I'll tell you what. To answer your question, I'll do my classic rock bands. So when I hear the term classic rock, there are a bunch of bands who I've written down who I think of straight away. Now I think of AC/DC, Whitesnake, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, Kiss, ZZ Top, Aerosmith. My mind is kind of focused. When I hear classic rock, I think 80s glam rock.
It's
mainly
weird. Because you're younger than us.
Because and again, is that the price of my age that I have a different perception? Apart from Guns N' Roses, those are all 80s bands. Whitesnake, Def Leppard, Kiss.
I would call all those guys hard rock.
Interesting.
Because you have distorted guitars and, aggressive vocals, but it's not heavy metal.
So this is really interesting.
It's
because,
in between,
Johnny's gone for classic as the era.
Yeah.
I've gone for the music. Yeah. I've gone for identifying musical styles because I did it here as well. For me, classic rock, guitar riff based songs, simple rhythm sections, because again, for me, this is where the lines between prog rock and classic rock blurs. If your rhythm section are playing incredibly complex stuff, you got yourself prog rock. If it's nice and simple, just dong 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 backing the guitar, you got your classic rock. Male singers, I associate male singers with classic rock bands, guitar solos. So for me, that's what excuse me. For me, that's what classic rock is. Riff-based songs, simple rhythm section backing the band, male singing, what was the last thing? Guitar solos. So I've taken the very musical approach to saying, I think classic rock is this, whereas Johnny has gone for the time and the era. What are your classic rock? What's your first impressions when you hear the word classic rock?
I might try to maybe name some bands.
Yeah. Who comes to your mind when you hear
that? That's funny because I would go from the same place Johnny's coming from up to your Guns N' Roses on the list. So basically, for me, if I probably can say for me, Pink Floyd is classic rock. The Beatles are classic rock for me. Queen, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Yes. I think all those, and Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Well, because for the new generation, Guns N' Roses are now old.
Yeah.
When they first started, I think they were quite important in the 90s because the 90s were a bit boring at the beginning, and people were listening to, what's the name, New Kids on the Block, that kind of stuff. They would be listening to boy bands and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, Britpop was taking off as well in the 90s, so things were changing a little bit for rock.
It was really good, but not heavy enough. And you had the attitude that Oasis was bringing into the scene, but then you had Nirvana and Guns N' Roses, which are complete different styles of rock, but they were not boring. They were like, we're noisy, we're doing all this stuff that people expect from rock stars, we're breaking the hotel rooms and using drugs and doing all this stuff. So those guys, they were the image of rock and roll at that time. But the 90s, that they feel that it just feels so far back in time now that it's classic in a way. What I'm trying to say basically,
you've said, excuse me, you've identified two bands that did the same job essentially in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yet you've said one of them a classic rock and one isn't. So can you tell me why you would call Guns N' Roses classic rock and not Nirvana?
No, I would call Nirvana classic rock in that sense, because they had the same, they're different in terms of music.
So can I identify what's happened?
Yeah.
I've based this is what I'm thinking, correct me if I'm wrong. I've based my definition of classic rock on the music side of it, the technicalities, the structure, the arrangements of the song. Johnny has based it on the time. You've based it almost on the attitude.
Yeah.
So we've got three completely different opinions. We've got three different takes on what classic rock means to us. And the best thing is that none of us are wrong.
Well, yeah.
Isn't it?
But I think it's that word rock. To me, the word rock is an attitude. Now, rock encompasses everything. So we know there's prog rock, there's blues rock. Actually, there isn't a pop rock as such because it's like pop hasn't got that attitude that rockers
maybe
have.
Britpop got close to that.
Yeah, but that to me that was just rock light. Mm-hmm. That's the way. I mean, I see those bands that they wanted that rock swagger. Yeah, but it was
they weren't delivering the goods.
No, just it was more lightweight. That's the way. Yeah. I see those. Fair.
Musically, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so like the Brit is I consider that Brit pop, and I think that there is a difference between pop and rock. Now, in rock music, that word rock, it to me encompasses not just the music, but the people as well. So it's people with a rock attitude that and it can be from any walk of life. It could be like you look at someone, you think that guy rocks, and he might be the milkman. I mean, it could be the postman.
Yeah.
But you see him walk down the road, he looks like a rock star.
Then he's connecting to what I said. It's the attitude.
But it's the attitude, yeah. And it's so when I say about classic rock, and I listed Pink Floyd in yes, but also Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Within those bands, within the band's music, you look at Iron Maiden, a lot of their rock, their tunes, and even now with the new one that they've released, I look at that as a lot of it is prog rock. It's heavy, but it's heavy progressive rock.
I can get on board with that as an Iron Maiden fan.
Flipping that over to yes, they'll put out a song like Don't Kill the Whale. And that is just a full-on rock-out song. So, to me, I know that Yes are a prog rock band and Iron Maiden are a heavy metal band.
At their core.
Yeah.
They're allowed to go off
But-
and do their stuff, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like it is hard to put into words, but within each band, the key word is rock.
Yeah.
Even though they do different styles for the majority of their stuff, but they are rock bands. Essentially, they're all rock bands.
Yeah.
And it might be blues rock, prog rock, even punk rock.
I think there's a few bands that no one would kind of argue that they're classic rock bands, like Black Sabbath. You know, but there's some bands. Okay, here's my point. Try to take the word classic out of rock and just put it into something else. Classic movies. Can you name a classic movie?
Casablanca, Citizen Kane.
Name a classic movie.
You put me on the spot. See,
Anything.
now I would say Where Eagles Dare. And that's...
Right.
That to me, well, I suppose because I'm older than you guys, I still look at that and just, I don't think, I mean, to me it's a classic war film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some people would more go for the black and white films as classic.
Yeah, exactly. When as soon as you said classic, I thought black and white famous. But
then
The Godfather.
I
can
would
be
say
classic.
that's my choice.
The Godfather could be a classic movie.
If someone says to me classic movies, the first thing that comes to my mind is The Godfather.
Yeah.
It's either the logo or you know.
So maybe it's about reputation as well.
It is. I think it's about your reputation, the reputation of that specific piece of art. Not the reputation itself, but the fact that the reputation is gonna last for longer than the average. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
For instance, you've got some really great movies. I'm going to stick to the movies for a second because I think it makes us think outside the box of what rock and roll and music is all about.
Yeah.
So thinking about movies, well, when was The Godfather, the first one? When was it made? Like
72.
72. So I wasn't around, and I'm a big fan of the movie. And I believe 30 years from now, people are going to still be talking about it. So that you can't argue against the fact that this is a classic. Classic would transcend the barriers of time. You know. So the Who, they're still around, they still exist. Yeah, but people listen to the albums they've done 30, 40 years ago. So that's classic. You know, for me, maybe their most recent album, although they're a classic band. Maybe, I wouldn't say that, I'm just using this as an example, maybe the latest album is not going to survive the test of time. So that won't be a classic album from them. Just saying that. You know, so I believe classic is anything that can survive for you know, for decades and still, and it's still relevant. After
Still have a place.
It's not something you just look back. Oh yeah. So think about movie posters. You can think about The Godfather. You can think about whatever. But think about the Dark Side of the Moon album cover. It's a classic. That image in itself, you always going to remember the Black Sabbath first album. That album cover is iconic. Okay, another word for classic is iconic. Anything that becomes iconic can be, you know, called classic, in my opinion. But, okay, I remember, I think it was Dave Grohl did an article for Classic Rock magazine about what is classic rock, whatever. So the Foo Fighters, are they too recent to be classic? Well, they might be, but their music has been around for 20 years. Is that so? Where do you draw the line? For how long do you have to exist and be relevant to be considered classic? That's one thing, you know. But
I think with your example with Foo Fighters, that's really interesting because having now heard your argument and your definition of classic, I would, if someone said, put Foo Fighters into a genre, I'd say classic rock.
there you go.
And I'd emphasise the classic because, as we mentioned, my musical distinction. Guitar solos, riff-based songs, simple rhythm sections, male singer. Foo Fighters to me are a classic rock band because of the music they produce. Yes, they have been around 20 years, but can the music that they're producing now be considered classic rock, or does that have to stand the test of time?
Do we still need to wait another 20 years to call their latest album a classic?
Yeah.
You know, people might listen to the album, oh, that's really good. Or is it good now? Is it good for the moment we're living in now? Is it relevant for the society now? Because rock and roll relates to a lot of social and political stuff as well. So is this relevant only for this moment in time? Or is it going to be relevant in 20 years? Or can I just call it a classic because I still listen to it after 5 years? You know, in the end of the day, I think as human beings, we're obsessed with putting labels into things, which is fine. It's what you know science does. If you find a new species of a plant or animals or whatever, you're like, oh, I need to name that thing. If you find, you know, a new dinosaur, like, oh, we didn't know about this one. You know, the bone structure looks a bit different. What's that? Oh, we need to name it, you know. That's going to be the Lazosaurus or whatever. So you found that, you need to name it. That's what we do. We can't just accept the existence of things without naming them. That's what we do as human beings. And I don't think it's important to clash over what is classic rock, what is this, what is that. Because maybe we're all right about it. Maybe I'm talking about the time, but I was talking about the attitude. You were talking about
music,
the musical side of it.
Johnny was talking
about the era. Yeah.
So this is a nice way to get back to the main, essentially the main crux of the show, because what has happened in recent times in all of our area of the industry is that this new wave of classic rock community has come up and it's grown and it's got bigger, and this album, this volume 1, was put out and a lot of people had issues with it. There was a gentleman who, I know he's a radio host on Planet Rock, who came out and said, you just can't call this a genre. You can't call this the new wave of classic rock for the reasons you said. Yeah. Because classic means it has to stand the test of time. Other people don't like that these classic rock bands. I mean, I know we've said a bunch of bands that on a musical spectrum starts here and ends here. You know, you've gone from Pink Floyd to AC/DC. I think they're two very different bands. But there's people who are unhappy labeling and saying these 42 new bands are now the next generation of classic rock.
Well, do you know, I think that comes down to the music they play. And then if you want to call a fairly new band classic, I don't have a problem with that. So that classic is like, okay, you need a certain reputation and you need to survive the test of time to be classic. Well, yes, for one definition. But if I listen to something like that reminds me of, let's put it, Deep Purple, right?
Yeah.
And someone says, oh, so what's that band like? Oh, classic rock. Because then it's so much easier to explain. So, oh, that's, you know, distorted guitars and the lead singer's got long hair and, you know, shouts on a microphone like that, high-pitched voice, whatever. So if I try to describe every single detail about the music, and I just say, do you know what? It sounds like classic rock.
Yeah.
Well,
is it classic? Maybe not by definition, but it sounds like classic rock. So I want to label it like that. What was the problem? You know?
Yeah.
Because I like to think that they're not, the new wave of classic rock movement are not labelling them as these are classic bands. It's, to me, I take it as they play in the style of classic rock bands.
Yes.
That's how I see it.
That's the way I see it. So it's not a genre of itself. It's just a little box to put these bands in that you know what you're getting. It's like, you know, like what it does on the tin.
Yeah.
What the label says, that's what you get.
The thing is that I agree with what Felipe was saying about in this day and age, everything needs to be categorized and shoehorned. Everything needs to be put in its place in the world. But I agree with what you're saying. And I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing, because we were earlier discussing the term rock. What a broad term. I mean, let's quickly take 1 minute and think about who can be rock. Pink can be rock. Justin Bieber, with the right production and with the right people, could be rock.
Yeah, if you change if you can get any pop song and play it heavier with a guitar, and that's rock.
Coldplay call themselves rock.
Yeah,
Coldplay call themselves rock.
Do you know they make fun of the fact that people call them soft rock?
Yeah,
isn't it? Well, you can again. Where do you draw the line? Coldplay can either be considered a slightly heavy for a pop band, or too light
Soft
for
for a rock
too
band.
soft for a rock band.
It's like Nickelback as well. But my point is that you've got a spectrum. Let's say the spectrum we spoke about is this big. The word rock on the spectrum becomes this big. Because like we said, you've got Coldplay. Pink, I mean, she's rock and roll as they get for a pop artist. So I'm in agreement with Johnny. The categorising of these particular 42 bands, I mean, I know the community have said there'll be another album, so there's more than 42, but this is, for me, the community who are the consumers, who are the ones buying the products, going to the gigs. This is the community saying, like Johnny said, this is how we are going to identify these kinds of bands. These bands here, that to us, they are the new wave of classic rock. Because Earache, a record label, did a show about a year ago that we were also on called The New Wave of Rock and Roll.
Well,
and that had a different set of bands, didn't there?
Yeah, The New Wave of Rock and Roll, because they it has to be another name because it's another project and something else.
Can I just say something really quickly? I went to a metal gig of my friends, and on that poster, the new wave of British death metal. So there's new waves of everything happening at the moment, which is fine. The only issue that's part of this discussion is, can you call classic rock a genre?
So thank you very much for joining us, guys, for the first part of this discussion. The second part obviously will follow, but we will keep you up to date on our social media about as and when that episode will be released. On our social media, you can follow us. We are at longliverocknrollpod on Instagram and Twitter, and you can search Long Live Rock and Roll Podcast on YouTube and Facebook to follow all of our channels and social pages. So once again, thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed it. I'll do Felipe's part and say keep on rocking, everyone. And as always, guys, long live rock and roll.